Hi, and welcome to the Punk CX podcast. My name is Adrian Swinsko, and I'm an advisor, best-selling author, speaker, and general explorer when it comes to customer and employee experience. I'm really interested in figuring out what it takes to build organizations that produce better outcomes for both customers and employees. So with that in mind, I seek out and interview CEOs, entrepreneurs, business and tech leaders, authors and academics to uncover some clues about what it takes to build such an organization. Now, some of you may know the podcast as the Rare Business Podcast, but I decided to rename and rebrand the podcast recently. This is for a number of reasons. First one was to mirror the title of my book, Punk CX, which was published in June 2019. Two, because I'm a fan of punk music. And three, it's just more fun, right? Anyway, if this is your first time listening to one of these interviews, then hello and welcome. And please do dive into the archives at adrianswinsko.com, as I've now completed over 300 of these interviews in the last few years. If this is not your first time listening, then welcome back and thank you. Anyway, that's enough from me right now. Let's get into the interview. So welcome to the next edition of the Punk CX podcast. With me today, I have Duncan Macdonald, who is Chief Information Officer at UPC, who are the leading cable operator in Switzerland. They're also part of the Liberty Global Group. Hey Duncan, how are you doing?
Oh, fine, thanks. And thanks for having me, Adrian.
You're very welcome.
Nice to be here.
Yeah, thank you. So, Duncan, for the benefit of our listeners and also the readers, the people who read the show notes, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and also about the work that you do?
Sure. So I'm basically, like as you said, the Chief Information Officer for a large cable company, which means, I pretty much run IT, I run delivery, but primarily, and the main reason I'm in Switzerland is I'm co-sponsoring a very large digital transformation of the entire business. And we're halfway through that, actually. We're 18 months into a 3-year program to do this.
And you can still talk about it?
I can still talk about it. And we are, because, and actually I was chatting about this the other day. I mean, in a way, we call it a program, but actually it's a transformation that will never end.
That's absolutely correct. I'll tell you a story. This is a bit of an aside, but before we started this call, in the I think you'll love this actually. In the book that I was telling you, I just wrote the Punk CX thing.
Yeah.
I take a pop at this whole transformation thing, and it comes from an old punk song by one of my favorite bands called Bad Religion, and they have a song called No Control. And there's a line in that song that says, "There's no vestige of a beginning, no prospect of an end." I love that, and I love that line. However, here's the interesting thing. That line is not theirs. That line comes from a book which was written by James Hutton back in 1788, who wrote the first acknowledged kind of treatise on geology, and it's called something to do with the kind of theory of the theory of Earth, as it were. And he did all this study and things about hills and mountains and valleys and rivers and lakes and things to try and better understand how things came about. And at the end, he concluded there is no vestige of a beginning, no prospect of an end. And
that's brilliant. So it's a bit like continuous change.
Absolutely, really. It's about evolution, rather than transformation, because it is never going to end.
No, and I guess for me that's been one of the big learnings over the last 18 months. Mm-hmm. That actually, you just keep evolving, and it becomes the norm.
Yes.
The change becomes the norm, and but it's a big mindset change from the old ways of working, really.
Yeah, absolutely. But that's not actually kind of why we talked about having a conversation today. I mean, because the thing that precipitated my reach out to yourself is that I saw a short video of you talking at Pega's online CES event at the beginning of April. And you were talking about your job and your approach to leadership, your organization, and how Pega's platform is helping you to do that, and which I thought was really inspiring. The thing in the video that really, really stuck out for me, you talked about empowering your people, energy, creativity, and pushing the boundaries, not caring about whether your team worked 9 to 5 or 8 to 6 or whatever, and about focusing on outcomes and things. And I thought to myself, blimey, That's completely spot on, given what we're going through right now. This current virus pandemic that we're going through, and the challenges that are facing us, and also kind of some of the aftermath that we're going to have to deal with, and how we build more adaptable and more responsive organizations that produce better outcomes for both the customers and the people. And I thought I was really inspired by your talk, and I wanted to kind of ask you some things about that in the video and about your leadership style, because that feels like a very aspirational place for many people that are trying to lead in organizations that are going through some of these changes. So if I can I dig into that a little bit?
No, sounds good. Sounds good. I'll tell you, it'd be interesting to know how the people who work for me compare to what I say. So you might get some feedback that says I disagree with everything, but no, definitely.
So first of all, I mean, can you kind of tell me a little bit more about how you would describe your leadership style? What it looks and feels like on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, sure. I mean, the first thing I'd say is in some ways it's a tough leadership style.
Right.
It doesn't mean easy, because I'm one of these people who put a lot of energy into constantly pushing. So I do push. I believe we're all responsible for driving forward the business, and it sounds corny, but I truly believe we have to protect the customer.
Yes.
And do what's right for the customer. So in some ways it's a very tough style, because, and you should speak to my wife about this, because I mean I will literally work any hours at any time if I have to, if it's the right thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
So in a way, I'm not wedded to a 9 to 5. I've never been wedded to a 9 to 5. I've been wedded to do the job, what's necessary, when it's necessary, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's one aspect on it. I'd say another aspect of the style is I believe in real transparency. I mean, I'm very open to definitely my top team and pretty much anyone I talk to.
Mm-hmm.
So much so, you normally get HR. Well, in my old job, in one of my previous jobs, not so much this one, they used to always be nervous when I used to step up on stage or speak to them, because I do believe that the more people know, the more we can all make the most sensible decisions.
Sure.
And again, I always have it with the customer in mind.
Right.
I definitely don't believe the knowledge is power thing. I think that's a fundamental blockage. So I believe the more people know, the more people are thinking about the same things, the better. And I also believe that anyone has a right to, raise questions, no matter how much they may think is irrelevant, or, I believe in open communication, back and forth.
And I mean, would you characterize kind of your style? Because I know that kind of some people will be thinking about this and go, some people are sitting there just nodding, going, yeah, I get that. And then there'll be other people that be going, that just sounds completely foreign to me. And then there'll be other people that will be going, oh, so that's obviously like a transformational style, or an authentic leadership style, or a servant leadership style, or situational leadership style. And I mean, do you characterize it in a particular way?
Well, that's a good question. I've never thought of characterizing it before, actually.
Well, that's fair enough. I mean, it almost just feels natural. You do what's going to feel what's right. Yeah,
definitely. I mean, I believe you have to trust people, right? So there is a thing about trust, and there is a thing about everyone being treated as adults.
Yeah.
And if you can't trust someone, I'll be honest with you, they shouldn't be working there, right? They should move on, because that to me is a default. And the other thing is, you have to trust that everyone is trying to do the right thing.
Yes.
And that has to be your default. And again, these are the things I had to learn, right? Because it's very easy for you to always think someone's trying to do the worst things, or, someone's out to get you. Whereas actually, if you change that whole psyche and just think everyone's trying to do the right thing, conversations take on a different slant.
Yeah. So can I ask, what or who inspired you to be this way?
Yeah,
it sounds like you kind of going. You've got that. You talked about changing kind of mindset. So it sounds like there's been a process, right?
Definitely. I mean, so if you look at my career, I started off as an IT consultant, and I was a heavy-duty coder and quite a geek. And then I took but I I'd say I wasn't disciplined. I was, I was on the edge. I worked hard, but I wasn't disciplined in a sort of management sort of way.
Right.
And I took a very conscious step to join one of the main consultancies. And so I went through a period of becoming very, very hard. And delivery was everything. But that is not what I'd call a long-term fulfilling way to be.
Sure.
So you get things done, you burn people out, but it's not actually the right style for the long term.
Yes.
And so eventually, actually, and it took too long, I found a coach.
Right.
And she is excellent. She was excellent. She kind of opened my eyes. By that time, I was getting a little bit frustrated about my career. Because actually being hard-nosed and actually getting things delivered will only get you so far. And part of what she taught me is if you look after people, there is also almost like a virtual circle, even if you look at it selfishly. If you look after people, they'll look after you.
Yes.
And that goes for your customers, your clients, your colleagues, and just break the circle. And she's taught me, so many new ways of looking at things. I've changed. I've fundamentally changed, and for the better.
And so I think you talked about trust, and you also talked about, you've talked about focusing on outcomes and empowering your people and things. Now, there's a lot of talk about that. There's a lot of talk about people wanting to empower their people and to trust them to do the right sort of things, but yet they still want to control them. There's almost like it's a conflict in that.
Yeah.
I mean, and many organizations are like that. They want to kind of monitor, measure, and control. I mean, have you had to sort of unlearn a whole bunch of things to move from one place? It was all about delivery to actually trusting the team and building the resilience and the creativity of the team.
Yeah, I mean, I'll take you through some of the things she taught me. I'm thinking back now. A big thing she taught me was about things you stress about.
Right. And
she almost broke down of 100% of things you stress about. How much you can actually control. How much will actually happen. And if you go through all that, it's like 4%.
Yes.
Of 100% of stress is that you can actually only do anything about.
Yes.
And so a lot of the things actually we get stressed about, you've actually just got to stop worrying about, right? You've actually got to put actions in place. You've got to monitor closely and stop getting stressed about. That was one of the key things she taught me.
Right.
The other thing, so a few of the other things, one, you do have to have capable people working for you, right? Yeah. So it's not about not having capable people. But the key is you get those capable people and then you let them work the way that they work the best, which is normally their own way.
Yes.
Why would you hire the best and then, take one arm, put it behind their backs?
Yeah.
So you hire the best, you trust them, you're very open with them around what you're trying to achieve so they understand the outcomes of what we're all trying to do, and then you give them the independence to help you get where you need to get to.
Yes.
And you give them the feedback platform that if they think you're doing the wrong things, they have an open feedback platform to help direct where we go. I would rather people, have just told me what the answers are. Why not? Most people know better than me on a lot of this. I see my role really is helping clear the barriers that's stopping them from doing what they need to do. So that's my view.
That's great. So because that talks about the idea that the biggest things that you focus on to help your people perform is like going, I am there to support them to do the best thing and help them do the best job that they can do, and then remove any barriers that they face.
Definitely. I always say to them, right, in theory, if I'm actually doing something, I normally turn into a bottleneck. I normally do, right? And so the way for me to avoid becoming a bottleneck is to almost, I delegate to avoid bottlenecks if I have to delegate. But then what I want to do then is be absolutely clear to focus on issue resolution or escalation resolution or get what anyone needs to get their job done.
Yes.
And that's because that is where I can be more effective because of where I am in the leadership chain.
Sure.
And that's the kind of the way we play it. We all understand what we need to achieve. We all try and then, take part of the role to get there. And we all communicate openly if things are getting in the way.
And is that a general kind of philosophy that's held across the group, or is that something that's more to do with your kind of like team?
It's definitely something. Interesting question again. Sorry. Yeah,
no, it's okay. I mean, all I'm trying to so I know that kind of there's certain organizations that are just predisposed to this type of way of doing it because that's their culture, right? And that's how they're set up. Then there's other kind of ones that change bubbles up from the bottom. People start doing things and they become successful, and then it gets it gets socialized and gets copied and replicated and so on and so forth, and then that can kind of change things over time. And I just wonder, kind of like, is this something you've stepped into, or is this something you've just developed and it might have had ripple effects beyond that?
I would say this. I'd say it's something I developed to suit my style. But I'd say, though, that, with regards to Liberty is actually, although it is a very big corporation, in some ways there's a lot of entrepreneurship in it.
Yeah.
So what I found is that they've allowed me to develop this style.
Right.
It hasn't conflicted. Again, it's a mix of being very professional, delivering results, but how you get there, the company is not, actually I think the company has been very supportive.
Right.
There's normally a shock when I first go into a business because it is very open. Right. And it is very energy, and it is very, and the open can be, we'll have harsh words as well as good words.
Yes.
So for me, and the Swiss culture was an interesting one to step into at first, actually, because I guess you could say there was wariness about having such direct conversations in an open group.
Yes.
Because, and then part of the culture change you've got to go is, how are people going to develop if they don't hear these discussions? And they're sensitive discussions. People want to hear these discussions. Yeah. Wrong.
I think it's, so it feels like to me is that it's almost using a sporting analogy. Is that it's you say, like, you take football as an example. You end up having the rules. It tells you what you can and what you can't do. It tells you kind of like what you how you know if you'll have won or not, but it doesn't tell you how to play the game.
No.
Hence why teams from as wild as, the wild and wacky Wimbledon back in the day could compete with some of the, the bigger, kind of more established teams, because they found a way of doing it. Like how Leicester succeeded and won the Premier League a couple of years ago, because they just had this team that emerged that was just way better than anybody else at that point in time. Totally.
I totally agree.
Perfect.
I mean, I'll tell you two more things, actually, now I'm thinking about it. I mean, the one is about, the point about I really don't mind about 9 to 5 is absolutely true. People, especially, and I think the corona has shown this, right? People are human, they have lives, they have families. Yes. They need flexibility. And what I found is by giving people the freedom just to work the way they want to work, I think actually you get more productivity. I genuinely do.
Yes.
Because I think it's unhealthy forcing people to constantly sit at a desk, not 12 hours a day or not 10 hours a day or 8 hours a day. I think it's unhealthy. And I think you get far better output by just letting people just work their way and when they can.
Yeah.
And I'd say another thing very particular to IT is one of the first things I do is I have a conversation around, to me, IT exists to support the rest of the business and really drive through. And it's really looking at our internal as well as so I think there's two things. One is protect the external customer at all top costs. And absolutely make sure the quality is there at all times. And two, though, is really understand the needs of our internal customers and really get customer focused. I don't think IT should have its own agenda for its own agenda's sake. I think IT agenda should be absolutely 100% aligned to the internal customers. And that's the other part of the philosophy. If your internal customers know that you are fighting for them, then they'll support investment back to you.
Of course.
So also the other thing is with my internal customers, I'm absolutely transparent and open as well. And this was another shock to some of the teams. So if we mess up, we'll put our hand up straight away. And some of our internal customers, it's a real shock because they're used to all these sort of smoke and mirrors and not here, point the finger over there. Me, I believe in absolute transparency on that because we've got nothing to hide.
Yes.
And you see a change in the working relationship with your internal customers as well.
Yes.
And it's a beautiful transformation. So they move from being frustrated, lack of understanding of why things are either taking so long or why things are happening. Why does IT, why do they need this money with a full transparency, they understand and they're willing to support investment cases. And it's a far better way of doing business.
Yeah, I think so. I don't know why it reminds me of another football analogy, if I may. We live in Brighton, and my wife and I are Brighton and Hove Albion season ticket holders, which means that we've been there for like 3 years, and we're sort of like in the Premier League for about 3 years now. So we're if we survive, then it's a good season. And I think it was a couple of years ago, we looked like we were on dodgy ground, and the team just looked a bit flat. And I was thinking about it, and I wrote something about it. I said, because I thought it was analogous to organizations that are going through a bit of a tough time, and it says, I think the analogy still holds for internal kind of teams, is like, if you show me that you're willing to scrap, for yourselves and on our behalf, like as fans, as it were, then we will completely go to bat for you. But if you show that you're just going to do a bit of a dance and go through the motions sort of thing, and it doesn't really feel that you care, then it's like that. That's the quickest way to lose people.
And that's it. But that's exactly it.
It's like show me that you care and scrap for me.
Exactly. If they know you're on their side, and they trust you that you're being transparent, the whole relationship turns into one of support.
Absolutely.
And it's just so much better to work in.
Yeah, absolutely. So you mentioned the kind of the coronavirus things. I mean, have things kind of changed for you in terms of how you and the kind of the team operate, or has it felt like kind of business as usual, or has there been other sort of like things that have showed up for you when you're thinking about managing the team and managing the operation and focusing on outcomes and things? Because I know this is crazy. It's some big stresses and strains in lots of organizations.
Yeah, I mean, the corona's been a very interesting time. I mean, if I was to sum it up, I'd say the team performed excellently about getting the whole company working from home. I couldn't have been more impressed and more proud, actually, of the way the team performed. I mean, it was one, and the team just for 2 weeks just worked fantastically. I mean, within 2 weeks, all of the call centers are working from home, all the offshore partners. Right. Amazing. And I'd say this. I also think the remote working. I think everyone expected people to ease up. Right. But I would say it's the opposite. I would say actually home working, through these tools such as WebEx, Zoom and Teams, I think it's actually incredibly intense. And I'm seeing a lot of intensity among the guys, and because you're basically working back to back on calls, and you're not having the breaks, you're not having the social interaction, and so actually I think we have to be very careful to make sure that, I think people can burn out actually this way of working all the time.
I mean, that's something that I've been thinking about. Is this that it adds on when you take the social. And what I mean by social, when you take the physical proximity away, that social dimension, and then you move into this remote working, and then the level of communication just goes up like a quantum step in terms of video calls and email volume and all of that sort of like messaging volume and all that sort of stuff. And therefore, there is this risk of, like as you say, people want to perform and do their best, but there's this risk around burnout, which and other things to do with kind of mental health and employee well-being and things.
Definitely.
And it just adds a layer of intensity, complexity, kind of like whatever you want to call it, onto kind of managing a team.
I almost think that in the first 2 weeks or 3 weeks of working from home, people almost overworked to prove that they were working. Yes. It's strange. I think what has to happen now is the normal way of working needs to kick back in, and people need to accept that, someone will be away from their phone. They will walk around the block and give them a break, and don't expect them to always be there. Because I do think remote working will be there now for the long term.
Yes.
Even if offices reopen, I think we have unlearned somewhat the need to always have face-to-face meetings.
Yes.
So I do think there is going to be a fundamental change.
Yeah, I think that your kind of experience around kind of working and stuff, and how different people's experience, as the kind of the lockdown sort of took a hold. I remember the first week of the full lockdown, I was in back-to-back calls kind of pretty much all week or something. I got to the end of the week and I was like exhausted. And then I looked back and I thought to myself, I've done bugger all.
Yeah.
Other than speak to people.
Yeah.
And I just thought, I have to get some control over this.
But that's exhausting. Speaking to people all the time is exhausting.
Absolutely. But I just kind of, from a pure perspective of just kind of like managing my own kind of energy and focus and things. So I ended up kind of taking my diary and just going and putting big blocks, like half-day blocks, that allowed me to, that said I am going to do either project work or writing or client work in this block, this half-day block, and I'm not going to put extraneous kind of calls and meetings and stuff in there. And so I end up creating some focused time, and then it forces me. Rather, I took back control of my time, rather than actually kind of just going yes to everybody, and then you end up with this jigsaw puzzle of time, as it were. Because otherwise, it felt like I was standing on shifting sands.
Yeah.
And that seems to have worked for me, just to allow me to put a little bit of a decision filter into saying yes to something, or when suggesting a time for something.
It's funny. That's one of the things, again, going back to my coach, that's one of the things she kept saying. Have you put enough thinking time into your day?
Yeah.
Because we all get too busy. It's all too easy just to be busy. And no, it's a good point.
So if I was to say to you, I mean, like you've done all this sort of stuff, and you've changed this kind of way of working, which is a bit more of it is a fully enabled, devolved kind of like in a way of working, which is, lends itself to the more adaptive, responsive organizations that most brands are trying to kind of build. But if I was to say to you, somebody's listening to this and they're thinking, I want to try and do that, I want to try and be that sort of kind of leader in their team, I mean, what advice would you give to them? Where should they start?
So what I found is it's not an easy transition. It's something you have to keep, because it is a fundamental change to how you think, actually, and how you judge value.
Yes.
Because you're no longer judging value by is someone sitting at a desk looking busy. You're judging value by the output, and also it's how well the team performs, not an individual. That's another key point, actually. So for me, it only worked because I had someone there that I worked with the journey on.
Yes.
You know, and this person held a mirror up so that when I wobbled and, you know, I had someone to talk to, and they sat there and held the mirror up and just went, "You're being ridiculous about this. Why, you know, why?" She asked the question, "Why?" a lot. "Why are you worrying about that? You know, what's that? How relevant is that?" She gave me an interesting one once. Here's another interesting one. She said, "There's no justice in business," which was fascinating, because sometimes we all get emotionally caught up in irrelevant things.
Yes.
Cycles around, and one of the things she taught me is, look, you know, the world is not a fair place. That's irrelevant. Put that aside and just get on and do what's right for you and for your business and for your customers. Or ignore the noise of what's happening over there.
Yes.
Because we're only human.
Yeah, can pick your battles, I guess, in many ways.
That's the key one. Pick your battles. So, and also, she talked about resilience. You know, we often wear ourselves out on irrelevant things. So for me, you need to find someone that you can work with. It's on, you know, in the journey. And it's interesting, especially if you've come from a consulting background. I think there's a lot of behaviours there you have to unlearn, because I think consultancy, unfortunately, rewards time spent doing things over maybe the most efficient way of getting the maximum value. So,
awesome.
My advice is get a very, very good listener and mentor.
Yes. Awesome. I mean, thank you, Duncan. That's great advice. I mean, but then if I switch it up a little bit, because you talked a lot about customers and things, and both kind of internal and also external. And thank you for kind of for introducing the internal dimension, because I think about organizations as being a bit like a relay team, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, you know, you're in a relay team, and actually, if you're the guy in front, and then you're sort of in service to the guy that's coming, the guy or the gal that's kind of coming up, you know, behind you, sort of thing. It's your job to be in the right place at the right time to help them succeed. And the team, the team with the fastest runners, isn't always the kind of the best relay team. Their job is to actually get the baton round, not just be quick. And so, the idea around my blog and writing and research and things is focused on service and experience and things. And what do you think? I mean, what would be your best advice in terms of producing better outcomes for your customers? I mean, what's the biggest thing that you found that has produced the best results for you? What sort of one thing that you do kind of like consistently you think this is just something that gives back in abundance?
Okay, so I'll give you the. How do I answer this? Because I've got a view of what I think future service should look like, for sure.
Well, let's do that in a minute. Let's do this one right now.
I mean, what I found. See, unfortunately, what I found right now is very basic.
That's fine.
So
basic stuff.
Yeah.
Most people don't do it very well.
Yeah. So for me, there is a certain discipline around. God, there's no other way of putting it. There's two things I found. One is empowerment. So very crystal clear. You make it very crystal clear. The number one priority is protect your customer, and I'm talking external customers now, actually.
Yeah.
And so that means that with open communication, everyone does have responsibility to speak up. So if they hear through that open communication that we're doing something wrong, no one has an excuse to not actually put their hand up and say, you know, we're doing the wrong thing.
Yes. And
so, and one thing, and you can, one of my other beliefs is that anyone can speak, and I will reward. I mean, personally, there's been a few cases where we've stopped massive deliveries because a junior member of the team put their hand up and said, I'm not sure about this, and I will stop instantly. Because no delivery is worth actually impacting a customer.
Yes.
But for that behavior to really sink in, you have to stand by your words.
Yes.
You cannot be angry by any member of the team that's raising a concern. You have to encourage that. And also learn. You have to learn from the lessons and be very transparent about it. So it's very basic, really. But it's just
a bit harder to do.
Yeah. And so even the world of digital transformation, you cannot forget the basics. That's that. Really.
That's fine. I mean, and so you kind of alluded to this idea about the kind of future of service, because that's one of the things I wanted to ask you kind of next, is like going, what do you think are some of the big challenges coming kind of down the track for people that want to deliver, great service or great experience in the future? What are the things from your perspective do we need to look out for?
Yeah, so I think, this is where digital comes in. I'll be honest with you, right? This is where, to me, I do think the world is going to keep changing quite rapidly over the next 10, 20 years. Because I think at the moment, the business silos the barriers between silos will slowly start disappearing. I don't think you'll get a company just doing telco products in the future. I don't think you'll get a company just doing energy products.
Yes.
I think you'll get companies that will sell digital services to their customers. And therefore, in some ways, the offerings are going to get more complex, but you need to make them more and more simple for your customers to understand.
Absolutely.
So for me, it's all around the personal journeys, the personalized offerings, and also the personalized ways that the customers want to be communicated to.
Yes.
Some customers might still want a letter. That's fine. But you've just got to. So for me, this is all around personalization, simplifying an increasingly complex world. And that to me is what digital is all about. And that on top of also keeping people safe, right, and secure.
Yes.
That will be the other big thing. So it'll be simplification, personalization, and security.
And that's not just kind of because we're talking in the middle of this kind of pandemic. That's not just about kind of like a virus thing. It's more of about, it's also takes on the dimension of both data and privacy and all of this sort of things as well. Yeah,
absolutely. So for me, in a world where, we're probably talking 20, maybe 20 years, maybe less, maybe 15, I'm not sure. But in a world where many, many companies are offering the same services, why would you go to a specific company? It's because it's one that you trust.
Yes.
And I think trust it's going to be trust, or you've had a previous experience, which again is trust. You've had a previous bidding relationship with them. And so trust is going to become such a competitive advantage.
Yes. Perfect. Thank you for that. So Duncan, before we kind of wrap up, because I'm pretty sure that you're, the other thing that was in the video is that you're a keen painter. And so you're probably, after this, you're probably going to take a break and kind of like splash some oils on the canvas somewhere. I'm pretty sure. But talking about things like that, like, which is almost a bit related to color and art and kind of, painting and stuff. So I published a new book last year called Punk CX, which we talked about. And it's this, it's very colorful, very visual. And it sort of tries to embody the spirit of punkness, because things are becoming a bit more complicated, like, as you kind of said, but we've got to try and make it simple to be able to cut through. And what I've been doing with people is asking them two different questions, and they're more like they're like word association or kind of like quick fire questions. If I said to you, what one word do you think would describe more of a punk approach to customer experience and what it takes to deliver that, what would you say? What would be the one word or two words?
Just one word, is it?
One or two words.
I've got an IT word for it, but I don't know how to say it any other way.
Go and say the IT word.
I believe in headless architecture.
There you go. That's the one. That's one from the edge.
I believe in not controlling, and this is what I'm actually working on in the digital world. I believe in not controlling the way a customer wants to work with you.
Right. And
you actually accommodating how a customer wants to work, and through whatever medium.
Yes. Headless architecture, I like that. It's like run from the edge.
Yeah,
And
so to me, you simply can just go into the customer's world rather than the customer having to come into your world.
awesome. So the second one I wanted to ask was like, what company or brand do you think epitomizes like a punk approach to deliver the experience that they deliver?
Wow, that's such a tough one. Yeah. That is such a tough one because I think companies are all becoming a bit too controlled,
right,
in their branding at the moment, and wow, that's really tough.
Okay, then we can have a kind of like a pregnant silence sort of thing.
Yeah.
Just leave it.
Yeah.
And then
I think though, saying that, I think whichever company does do this, I think there is a large part of the population want a different approach.
Yes.
And in a world where there is so much information, you don't want to constantly be moving between different environments and different user interfaces, and anyone who can accommodate you more, I think, will get a definite competitive advantage.
Awesome.
So,
nice.
there was one more thing I was going to quickly jump in, which I forgot to mention, right?
Yeah, of course.
Another key thing I was taught very quickly is, and I teach this a lot to the technical guys, is how you sell a message, right? And sell is normally a dirty word. But actually, we're not taught to tell stories.
Yeah.
And actually, storytelling is a very powerful way of doing business.
Yes.
And that was, sorry, I just realized I didn't mention it. And telling stories is a key part of how you can help bring your customers, internal and external, on a journey with you. So.
No, it's awesome. That's a great ad at the end. Storytelling. I mean, and everybody can tell stories.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Almost like the more personal they are, the better.
Yeah.
Because they're easier to tell if they are your own.
Yeah.
Awesome, Duncan. Well, that's all I have for today. I mean, I guess we could keep going, kind of like, but then
I hope it's giving you what you're after.
No, absolutely. I mean, I just want to say thank you for congratulations on the success of the so far and the journey that you're on. I think it's both. You've been both insightful and inspiring at the same time. But just wanted to say, thank you for sharing your time and your insight with us and experience with us today. That's been awesome.
Oh, and thank you very much for having me. I mean, I've really enjoyed this, so thank you. I appreciate it. But like I say, I'd be interested to know what the people who work for me or around me say. So
we'll make sure we ask them.
Yeah. Thank you.
Hi, and welcome to the Punk CX podcast. My name is Adrian Swinsko, and I'm an advisor, best-selling author, speaker, and general explorer when it comes to customer and employee experience. I'm really interested in figuring out what it takes to build organizations that produce better outcomes for both customers and employees. So with that in mind, I seek out and interview CEOs, entrepreneurs, business and tech leaders, authors and academics to uncover some clues about what it takes to build such an organization. Now, some of you may know the podcast as the Rare Business Podcast, but I decided to rename and rebrand the podcast recently. This is for a number of reasons. First one was to mirror the title of my book, Punk CX, which was published in June 2019. Two, because I'm a fan of punk music. And three, it's just more fun, right? Anyway, if this is your first time listening to one of these interviews, then hello and welcome. And please do dive into the archives at adrianswinsko.com, as I've now completed over 300 of these interviews in the last few years. If this is not your first time listening, then welcome back and thank you. Anyway, that's enough from me right now. Let's get into the interview.